The Metropolitan Institute of Antiquities was silent, as it always was after hours, a silence so profound it felt almost reverent, as though the ancient relics themselves demanded it. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting long, sterile shadows across marble floors and glass display cases that housed millennia of human history. The air was crisp with the scent of old paper, preserved fabrics, and something older still, dust from ancient earth. Dr. Helen Argyle moved with purpose through the archival wing, her heels muffled against the stone tiles. The hallway lights flickered to life ahead of her as motion sensors registered her approach, then blinked off behind her, leaving the corridor in a rolling wave of gloom. Cradled in her gloved hands was a small, velvet-lined box, its interior cushioned with foam and reverence. Inside it rested something that had consumed her for the past 7 months, the Zeresh tablet. Roughly the size of a hardbound book, the tablet was dark basalt, chipped at the edges, its surface etched with a chaotic swirl of cuneiform glyphs, spirals, and oddly, what looked like mirrored repetitions of certain symbols. Since its discovery at a dig site near Mosul, linguists and historians had pored over it, publishing theories, arguing over translations, and ultimately declaring it indecipherable. But not Helen. Last night, after 15 straight hours in the secure research lab, she had finally cracked the cipher. The message hadn't just been a religious chant or historical record. It had been a map, a set of instructions, a warning. The translation pointed to a place long dismissed as legend, a temple spoken of in fragmented texts and hushed tones. The Temple of the Thousand Eyes. And more astonishingly, how to unlock its inner vault. Helen sat at her desk in the corner of the archival wing, flicking open her laptop with trembling fingers. Her pulse was still elevated, not from exhaustion, but exhilaration. She could already feel the weight of history shifting. Discovery of the temple would alter every major timeline of Mesopotamian civilization. It would validate the controversial texts she had built her career upon and silence her critics. But there was more to it than glory. There was something dark in the translation. A phrase that had repeated throughout the inscription, almost like a mantra. The eye sees only in reflection. She wasn't sure what it meant. Not yet. But she knew better than to dismiss it. Helen leaned in and typed her final note into the encrypted digital notebook she had kept separate from the museum servers. Confirmed. The key lies in the mirrored glyph. Disclosed to no one. Not yet. She hovered her finger over the save icon, then hesitated. A soft noise echoed down the corridor behind her. A click. A breath? She paused, listening. Nothing. The lights overhead dimmed for a second, then flickered back to life. Helen straightened up, heart now thudding faster. She closed the velvet box and slipped it into her leather satchel. The instinct to leave, to lock it up in the deepest vault of the museum, clawed at her. Then she heard it again. A whisper of movement. A footstep. Very close. Her hand reached slowly for the emergency call button under her desk, but it was too late. She turned, and something heavy struck her skull with brutal force. There was a sharp, bright pain, like lightning cleaving through her vision. Her knees buckled. She collapsed sideways, her cheek smacking the cold tile floor. The satchel tumbled from her shoulder. The Zeresh tablet skittered out of its velvet box, spinning on the marble like a coin, then landing with a dull clack. She tried to cry out, but only managed a strangled breath. And then everything went black. Detective Lena Hart arrived just after sunrise, her boots echoing across the marble steps of the Metropolitan Institute of Antiquities as the first light of morning bathed the Gothic facade in amber hues. A chill hung in the air, sharp and biting. Early autumn in the city had always felt like a warning of harsher things to come. She paused at the threshold, eyes narrowing against the backdrop of fluttering police tape and a museum that still slept in shadows. She'd been here before, school trips, lectures, even a gala once, but this time was different. A body had been found among the relics. A sacred place of knowledge was now a crime scene. Lena flashed her badge at the responding officer and ducked under the tape. Detective Hart, the sergeant on duty, greeted her with a clipboard and a tight frown. "You'll want to see this yourself." She stepped inside and was met by cold silence and the faint scent of floor polish and old books. The kind of smell that made you want to whisper. The Institute had always felt like a cathedral for the past. It was personal, too. Her niece, Casey, volunteered in the archives every Saturday. Lena knew the layout of the museum better than most cops in the city. But murder? That was new. She moved through the halls quickly, past shuttered exhibits and locked doors, until she reached the archival wing, where Dr. Helen Argyle had spent the final minutes of her life. The room was untouched, sealed by protocol and the reverence owed to the dead. A forensic tech stood off to the side, adjusting her gloves. "We haven't moved anything. Time of deaths estimated around 10:45 p.m. Lena nodded silently and stepped forward. Dr. Argyle lay slumped sideways against her desk, half sitting, half sprawled on the cold floor. Her gray blazer was soaked with blood near the collar, the source a deep, crushing fracture at the base of her skull. Her glasses had fallen off, one lens cracked, and lay inches from her outstretched fingers. There were no signs of a struggle. No signs of panic. Not a single item overturned. Whatever had happened fast. Lena studied the room. Everything was in its place. Shelves of categorized artifacts, labeled trays, and folders tucked meticulously away. This wasn't just neatness. This was curatorial discipline. Argyle was a woman who lived by organization. Precision. But something was missing. Her eyes swept the desk again. A velvet-lined box sat open, empty. The soft padding still bore the outline of something rectangular. "Was something taken?" she asked. The tech nodded. According to the night logs, Dr. Argyle had checked out a recent dig find, a cuneiform tablet. High profile. There was a full security form processed yesterday evening. Lena frowned. Name? The Zeresh tablet. Lena's stomach tightened. Even she had heard of it. An object shrouded in academic speculation. Unearthed under strange conditions. Written in a language no one could decode. Until now? Her gaze shifted to the one flickering light source in the room, Dr. Argyle's laptop, still open on the desk. The screen had dimmed slightly but was not in sleep mode. She leaned closer and read the blinking words on the screen. Confirmed. The key lies in the mirrored glyph. Disclosed to no one. Not yet. That last line repeated itself, flashing gently like a dying heartbeat. Disclosed to no one. Disclosed to no one. Whatever Helen had discovered, she hadn't trusted anyone with it. Not even the Institute. Lena turned back to the forensic team. Any signs of forced entry? None. Locks were intact. Windows sealed. Digital access logs show Helen entered around 9:15 p.m. A silent alarm was triggered at 10:42, the kind triggered when someone forgets to disarm while locking up for the night. And cameras? Lena asked. Mostly motion-based. Old system, still being updated. But here's the strange part, only one other movement was recorded last night. The tech held up a tablet displaying the security readout. 10:49 p.m. Just 7 minutes after the alarm. Lena studied the map. Whoever it was had moved only through one blind corridor, a service hallway not covered by any cameras. They knew the system. They knew how to avoid detection. This wasn't a clumsy robbery. This was targeted. She folded her arms, eyes drifting once more over the body, then to the empty box where the tablet had been. A murder. A stolen artifact. A cryptic warning typed in haste. And something else, something that nagged at her. Why had someone murdered a scholar, stolen a stone tablet, and then vanished without a trace? Was it about money? Information? Revenge? Or was there something more at stake? Lena stepped back, jaw set. She was no archaeologist, but she knew how to follow threads. And somewhere in this building was the first knot she needed to untangle. Detective Lena Hart stood beneath the grand rotunda of the Metropolitan Institute of Antiquities, where sunlight filtered through the massive stained glass dome, casting fractured colors across marble and polished oak. Beneath its kaleidoscopic light, 5 people sat in uncomfortable silence, museum staff turned suspects, gathered like pieces on a chessboard. She watched them carefully. Everyone in this room had access. Everyone had motive. And someone had killed Dr. Helen Argyle. 1. Dr. Lucas Wren, the colleague. Tall, silver-haired, and perpetually disheveled in a tweed jacket that smelled faintly of pipe smoke, Dr. Lucas Wren was an old-school archaeologist and Helen's closest academic rival. They had once co-authored papers and co-led digs, but 3 months ago, things had turned. A public falling out over the authenticity of the Zeresh tablet had left their partnership in ruins. Lucas insisted the tablet was a forgery. Helen proved him wrong with a single inscription. Lena found him alone in the research lounge, slouched into a cracked leather chair beside a cold cup of tea. She didn't trust anyone with the translation, he said quietly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. But I knew she was close. I thought she'd share it with me eventually. His voice was heavy. Regretful? Or rehearsed? Were you here last night? I left around 9. Ask Marina. She saw me leave. She see you exit the building? He hesitated. She saw me near the staff lot. I didn't check out. My ID badge was acting up again. You can ask IT. Convenient, Lena said, scribbling in her notebook. Where did you go after? Home. I read some articles. Had a drink. Fell asleep grading papers. No witnesses. No alibi. 2. Olivia Chin, the PR director. Olivia Chin was corporate silk in human form, sharp bob, sharp suit, sharper voice. She didn't sit when Lena called her in. She paced. Her heels echoed like metronomes of irritation. She was going to cancel the press conference, Olivia snapped. Said it was too dangerous. What does that even mean? It's a clay tablet, not a cursed relic. Why would that matter? Olivia turned on her, eyes blazing. Because we had investors. Grants pending review. Media outlets scheduled. You don't delay $1 million campaign because you suddenly decide history is too spooky. Where were you last night? Home, she said without hesitation. On a video call with 3 other department heads. Budget planning. Can that be verified? Olivia tapped furiously on her phone. I'll send you the Zoom link and timestamps. I was online from 9:30 to midnight. Check the logs. Lena nodded, but Olivia wasn't finished. Whatever Helen found, it scared her. She told Charles she wanted the artifact resealed. Quietly. No press, no photos. Just buried again. Like it never existed. And how did Charles respond? Olivia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Ask him yourself. 3. Jamal Rafiq, the student. At 26, Jamal Rafiq had the nervous intensity of someone still proving he belonged. His dark hair was rumpled, and his eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. He sat cross-legged in the staff break room, a spiral notebook clenched like a shield against his chest. She didn't tell me much, he said in a whisper. Just that the tablet wasn't what everyone thought. What was it then? She didn't say. Just kept muttering about ancient covenants. Things hidden on purpose. She said secrets buried too long have teeth. Lena leaned in. Was she afraid of someone? Jamal nodded. Yes, but I don't think it was someone in the building. I think it was the tablet itself. Lena blinked. You think an artifact killed her? He bit his lip. I don't know what I think. But she made me promise not to go looking. Said the translation could rewrite history or end it. And where were you last night? Still here. Until about 10:30. Cataloging records. You can check the logs. And you didn't see or hear anything? No, he said, his voice cracking. Just cold. Like the whole archive had gone still. Then I left. Another partial alibi. And a bone-deep fear. 4. Marina Bell, The night guard. Marina Bell was solid as stone. 61 years old, built like a linebacker and known for her strict adherence to routine. She'd worked at the Institute for over 2 decades and was the one who discovered Helen's body. But her patrol route, as Lena quickly learned, had blind spots. I did my rounds. Everything looked normal until I passed the East Wing around 11:05, Marina said, arms crossed. That's when I saw the office door open and called it in. You didn't check before then? There's a 10-minute blind spot between the East Wing and the main hall, she admitted, avoiding Lena's eyes. Always has been. Budget cuts. Not enough cameras. And you didn't report that vulnerability? Marina looked uncomfortable. I told Charles. Twice. He said it'd be fixed next fiscal year. Lena narrowed her eyes. Did you see anyone leave? No. But I saw Lucas Wren heading toward the staff lot around 9. Said goodnight to him. How long between then and your next sweep? Marina hesitated. About 35 minutes. I checked other wings, then came back through. Long enough for someone to slip away. 5. Charles Hargrove, the director. The last suspect was the Institute's figurehead, Charles Hargrove, a man of perfectly trimmed beards and perpetually raised eyebrows. He greeted Lena in his sprawling, wood-paneled office like she was late for an appointment. I won't pretend to understand cuneiform, he said, gesturing for her to sit, but I do understand consequences. Helen's death is a tragedy, yes, but so is the chaos it may cause if this isn't contained. Contained? This museum is one of the city's crown jewels. The discovery of the Zeresh tablet was poised to launch us into international headlines. Now, we're one headline away from a scandal. Lena leaned back in her chair. Did you know she was planning to stop the press conference? She'd made noise about it, yes. Claimed the artifact posed a moral dilemma, but she wouldn't give specifics. I told her we could delay, but she insisted on secrecy. Did she mention being threatened? She mentioned being watched, he said grimly. But we all assumed she meant journalists sniffing around. And the camera blind spot in the East Wing? He looked down. Yes, it's been a known issue. We had plans to install motion-detecting cameras, but, well, the money was tied up in the Zeresh exhibit. Lena stood. She had 5 suspects. 5 stories. A former lover turned rival. A furious PR director. A frightened student. A loyal guard. A director with too much to lose. And a stolen artifact that might just have been worth killing for. The storm outside had deepened by the time Lena returned to Dr. Helen Argyle's office. Thunder rolled faintly beyond the stone walls, like distant drums warning of something ancient waking. She now sat alone in Helen Argyle's office, the quiet broken only by the low hum of the forensic team's equipment and the occasional crackle of static from her radio. The space was as Helen had left it, papers still scattered across her desk, a half-empty teacup beside the computer, and one chair askew, as though someone had stood up in a hurry. The recovered contents of Helen's digital notebook were now visible on the laptop screen, mirrored onto Lena's tablet by the tech team. Most of the files were dense, dozens of pages filled with Akkadian transliterations, grammatical dissection, and comparative glyph analysis. Helen had been thorough, meticulous even. It was academic work at its finest. But Lena wasn't looking for scholarship. She was looking for intent. And then something caught her eye. Buried within 3 separate documents, each named differently, each dated weeks apart, was a repeating line, quiet, consistent, deliberate. The eye sees only in reflection. Not a footnote. Not a quote. It was embedded mid-translation, then later highlighted in a different font, as if Helen had added it after the fact. Lena's brow furrowed. Reflection. The phrase appeared in 3 separate cuneiform passages, none of which referenced each other, at least not directly. Lena dug further. One of the recovered folders was labeled cryptically, mirror_glyph_final. Inside was a high-resolution scan of the Zeresh tablet. But it looked wrong. Off. Lena blinked. The entire image had been flipped horizontally. At first it seemed like a misalignment. Then she saw the file name. ZT_scan_mirrored_VR.3. This wasn't a mistake. Helen had done this intentionally. Lena opened a side-by-side view of the original and mirrored scans. She wasn't a linguist, but her eye was trained to spot inconsistencies, and there it was. A cluster of glyphs in the mirrored version formed a shape that didn't appear in the original. A pattern. Not linguistic, but mathematical. Coordinates. Using Helen's own annotation tools, Lena traced the mirrored characters and input them into a georeferencing tool, one Helen had often used for site logistics. The result loaded in seconds. And it wasn't some buried tomb in a rock. It was here, inside the museum. Lena pulled up a digitized blueprint of the building. She zoomed in on the lower levels, past the main galleries and research offices, until she saw the coordinates snap into place. Room B7. Storage. Restricted access. Unlisted on public maps. A relic of the museum's expansion in the 1980s, rarely accessed except for special restorations. Her pulse quickened. It wasn't just the odd phrase. It wasn't just the mirror scan. It was the implication. Helen had found something she wasn't supposed to, and someone had killed her for it. Lena stood, her fingers tightening around her tablet. Whoever took the Zeresh tablet must have known about the mirror glyph. They didn't just want the artifact. They wanted what it pointed to. Lena sat in the security control room, lit by a dozen surveillance monitors casting a cold glow across her face. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard as the server loaded access records. She'd requested logs for Storage B7, the hidden room beneath the eastern wing. For names had clearance. Dr. Helen Argyle, Dr. Lucas Wren, Director Charles Hargrove, and Marina Bell, the night guard. Only 4. Lena's jaw tightened. She had reviewed Marina's patrol route twice, yet somehow the vault had never come up. She called Marina back in. The security guard entered with her shoulders squared, but her eyes restless. She sat down across from Lena, fidgeting with the zipper on her jacket. "Why didn't you mention the vault?" Lena asked without preamble. Marina blinked. "I forgot. It's not part of my routine unless the motion sensor pings. That room's sealed most of the time." Lena tapped her tablet. The motion detection log appeared on screen, time-stamped. Storage B7 triggered an alert at 10:49 p.m. 7 minutes after the alarm in Helen's office. 7 minutes after Helen likely died. "You're telling me," Lena said slowly, "you didn't see this alert?" Marina leaned in, squinting. "That can't be. I check alerts religiously. I would have noticed that. You didn't? Or someone cleared it before you saw?" The room fell silent. Marina's eyes flicked sideways, then back to Lena's. "You think I tampered with the system?" "I think someone did. And you're the only one with direct access to the security backend during night shifts." Marina swallowed hard. "I didn't touch anything. But I know who could." Lena waited. "Hargrove," Marina whispered. "He's had me do things before. Keep rooms off logs. Cover private viewings. Said it was for donors. Said if I valued my job." That was enough. Lena's next stop was the director's office. Charles Hargrove was already waiting, seated behind his mahogany desk like a man accustomed to managing crises. He didn't rise when she entered. "Detective Hart," he said, folding his hands. "I assume this isn't a courtesy visit." She cut to the point. "Why does a museum director have access to an artifact vault?" Hargrove smiled faintly, as if the question bored him. "Fundraising. I host private previews for high-level donors. Artifacts, early restorations. Storage B7 holds rare pieces that haven't been cataloged yet. It's standard practice." "Standard," Lena repeated. Even though the only other people with access are a lead archaeologist, the curator, and the night guard. He didn't respond. "Did Helen ever tell you what she found?" Now his eyes flickered. For a moment, he looked not bored, but careful. She was vague, he admitted, but excited. Said the tablet contained more than a map, said it was important, monumental. She used the word leverage. That got my attention. Leverage over what? Hargrove leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice as if afraid the walls might hear. The Temple of the Thousand Eyes. You've heard the stories. Lena nodded once. A supposed cult sanctuary, buried centuries before Babylon. Said to hold something forbidden. A myth, Hargrove said. Or so we thought. But if Helen had proof it was real, that kind of discovery rewrites the history of the region. And for a museum like this, he gave a soft, reverent whistle. Global attention. Funding for a decade. Recognition from the top academic institutions. And she didn't want to share it? She wanted to delay the unveiling. Said the world wasn't ready. That certain truths could unmake things if released too quickly. He gave a bitter laugh. I told her she was being paranoid. And what did she say to that? Hargrove's face changed then. The humor dropped. His voice turned solemn. She said, he hesitated, recalling. She said, some things should stay buried. Not because they're lost, but because they were meant to be forgotten. The silence hung heavy. Lena stood slowly. Did you ever go into B7 without her knowledge? I didn't need her knowledge, he replied, coolly. I outdrank her. But Lena had seen the tremor in his hand just now, the too quick swallow. As she left his office, she made a note. Charles Hargrove is hiding something. And someone knew what Helen found before she could go public. The clock was ticking. The Zeresh tablet was missing. And now Lena had a new direction. That night, long after the museum had emptied and the halls had gone still, Lena Hart returned to Dr. Argyle's office with a single item in hand, the ancient stone mirror. She had it laid carefully on a sterile glass surface in the forensics lab, beneath a long beam ultraviolet light. The room was silent, save for the hum of electricity and the low buzz of the light warming up. Lena stood with arms crossed, eyes fixed on the artifact like it might whisper answers if she stared long enough. Then there it was. Under the UV, something shimmered faintly along the rim. Not damage, not dirt, carvings. Finer than the eye could catch under normal light, they pulsed faintly with phosphorescent minerals, intentionally etched with some form of luminescent ink or oxidized compound used in ancient burial texts. Lena snapped photos and ran them through image enhancement software. The symbols weren't in standard cuneiform. They were a variant, obscure, regional, half lost to history. She called in a linguistics contact from the university. A hurried, grainy video call. Together, they traced it line by line. The translation emerged, piece by piece. The key to the eye is not what it shows, but what it hides. Seek the shadow cast by ambition. Lena stared at the screen. It wasn't just a riddle, it was a warning. Helen had known. She'd deciphered this, or at least part of it. Enough to understand that the mirror and the tablet were two halves of something larger. A puzzle. A secret locked behind symbols and deceit. And she had told no one. Not because she didn't trust them, but because someone wanted it so badly, they'd killed her for it. Lena leaned back in her chair, breath shallow. The deeper she dug, the more the facts shifted under her feet. This wasn't about fame or academic rivalry. This was something older, more dangerous, and buried beneath layers of lies. She opened the mirrored image file again, the one Helen had labeled mirrorglyph. Scanning it now with new eyes, Lena paused. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, almost cropped out, was a sliver of something out of place. She zoomed in, enhanced the contrast. A name badge, reflected off the glass display behind the tablet. It hadn't been visible in the original orientation, but in the mirrored version, it caught the light in just the right way. Lena froze. There was no mistaking it. Jamal. That night, with the museum cloaked in silence and the last patrol making its rounds, Lena called Jamal in. He entered the office slowly, hands tucked into the pockets of his hoodie, eyes darting to the mirror on the table, its surface now draped with a cloth. The air felt dense between them. Lena gestured for him to sit. He didn't. "You worked late last night," she began, voice calm but firm. Jamal's gaze flicked to the floor. "I left at 10. Ask Marina. She didn't see you leave. And you didn't use the main exit. You passed through the East Wing." A pause. "You knew that route wouldn't trigger the door logs." He didn't deny it, just swallowed hard. "I just wanted to see the tablet again," he said, barely above a whisper. "One more time before she locked it away." She said, "I wasn't ready." "Ready for what?" Jamal's eyes shimmered, glassy with memory. He exhaled, slow and jagged. "To be remembered." He sat down then, slowly, like his body couldn't hold the weight of the truth anymore. And he told her everything. How he'd been obsessed with Helen's work, not just the discovery, but what it could mean. How he'd seen the notes she tried to hide, pieced them together, mirrored the glyph. How the coordinates led him to storage B7 and the mirror. How he'd gone back to her office, flushed with excitement, ready to prove himself. But Helen had already known. "She caught me there," he said. She wasn't angry. Just afraid. Afraid of what? He looked up at Lena then, something fragile in his face. She said it wasn't about fame. Or history. That the mirror wasn't just symbolic. That it did something. What do you mean did something? She believed it showed more than the past. That it could reveal truths buried in people, things they didn't want to see. Memories. Regrets. Obsessions. He ran a hand over his face. She said it could break your mind. That people weren't meant to look too closely into themselves. Lena thought of the riddle again. The key to the eye is not what it shows, but what it hides. She told me she was going to delete everything. All the translations. Everything we'd worked for. Said the world wasn't ready. And you killed her. I didn't mean to. His voice cracked. She reached for her laptop. I panicked. I grabbed her arm. He clenched his fists, trembling. I pushed her. Not hard. But she lost her balance. Hit the corner of the desk. Silence swallowed the room. Only the distant sound of rain tapping the windows reminded Lena the world was still turning. She was gone before I could even call for help. I didn't know what to do. I took the tablet. Hid it behind a loose panel in the ancient text section. I didn't want anyone else to see what she saw. Lena closed her notebook. It wasn't premeditated, but it was murder. And it was over. She radioed the officers on night duty. Quiet footsteps followed. Jamal didn't resist when they placed him in cuffs. Didn't speak. Didn't look back. By dawn, the mirror and the tablet were both sealed in evidence crates, marked for secure storage. The story released to the press was simple, a tragic accident. A revered scholar lost. A young man overwhelmed by ambition. But Lena knew the truth was stranger. Deeper. Still unfinished. Before the evidence team arrived, she had studied the mirror one last time. And in its surface, just for a moment, she hadn't seen her reflection. She'd seen Helen. Smiling, calm, as if she had known all along this moment would come. As Lena closed the case file, she scrawled a final line at the bottom of the page. The mirror sees what we deny, but it never lies. And she wondered, was Helen trying to protect the world from the truth? Or was she protecting the truth from the world? If you enjoyed this story, leave a like or share with friends, and as always remember to subscribe for more stories.